Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I have a quick build that I've been playing around with for a little while and thought I'd share it on here for anyone who's looking for a new setup to spice up their Nightblade life. We're going to be playing as a sniper with a slightly different setup than my previous toxic sniper build from a few months back when I first started the channel. As you probably saw in the title, this setup is specifically geared up for no proc, no CP PvP content. So think Imperial City and Cyrodiil. The build also performs decently well in Battlegrounds, so you can always give it a go there as well. But you can also just have a ton of fun sniping people from the rooftops of forts in Cyrodiil, or ganking people in towns, or with a group if that's your jam. And if you don't like the idea of playing no proc, no CP content, I'll go over what I would change to run this in normal content too. So first off, we'll want to play as a stamina race, and I find that Dark Elves and Khajiits work very well with this sort of a setup, though you could pretty much use whatever you'd like. Dark Elves get a bonus to their weapon and spell damage, along with getting some resistance to fire damage, which somewhat helps to offset part of the penalties that we take as a vampire when it comes to fire. So that's the logic going with a Dark Elf. Also, Dark Elf Jesus just happens to be my only Nightblade, so it's always fun to bust him out and get some laughs. We're going to take the Lover as our Mundus Stone to stack on as much penetration as we can, and then place all of our attribute points into stamina. We're also going to want to be a stage 2 vampire to gain access to the passive Dark Stalker, which allows us to ignore the movement speed penalty while in sneak. It also decreases the time that it takes to enter sneak by 50%, allowing for quicker getaways and a speed buff to teabagging, which is a rare buff that we ought to take advantage of. We also gain access to Strike from the Shadows, which buffs up our damage for 6 seconds after we leave sneak, invisibility, or mist form. If for any reason you want to run Undeath and Unnatural Movement, you can go up to stage 4, but I find that the penalties begin to really weigh you down past stage 2, so I like to leave it there for this sort of a character. Our gear today is going to be a mix of 4 pieces of Nyx Hound's Howl from the Balorgh DLC dungeon, 4 pieces of Shell Splitter, otherwise known as Shit Splitter, which is a newer set from Cyrodiil, which can also just be purchased from guild traders, and then 3 pieces of Wrath of the Imperium, along with Oakensoul. Wrath of the Imperium can be looted from boxes that are purchased with alliance points in Cropsford, otherwise known as Crapsfart inside of Cyrodiil, where you'll find a gear vendor standing next to the flag on top of a sort of wooden platform. Or alternatively, this set can just be purchased from guild traders too, and no monster set for us today. Nyx Hound and Shid Splitter are both medium sets, so you can split those pieces of Shid between all of the clothing pieces on your body, and then have one piece of one of those 2 sets as a ring or necklace. For example, my character is wearing Nyx Hound as a chest, belt, feet, and necklace, while Shit Splitter is being worn as a helmet, shoulders, arms, and legs. Damn it, next time I use 4-piece sets, I'll have to make it head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes, knees and toes, head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes, necklace, ring, and Oakensoul. Don't forget to equip a bow. I can't believe I didn't think of that until recording. Oh well. Anyways, you'll want all of your armor pieces to be divines with max stamina glyphs, so we can keep adding on to our XXX penetration and have a nice stamina pool to draw from. Once you have those 8 pieces in place, you'll want to get a hold of a Bow of Imperial Wrath, along with a jewelry piece, and then of course an Oakensoul ring. The bow can be transmuted to the precise trait for more critical, like I have here, or if you prefer some more penetration, you can always go with sharpened. I like to stick a weapon damage glyph on my bow for a nice generalized buff, but you could also use something like a glyph of absorb health instead if you'd prefer to get some random heals back. All of my jewelry pieces, including Oakensoul, are infused with weapon damage enchantments. And in order to gain the full benefits of these sets in normal content, where you can proc the 5-piece bonuses, I would just replace the Wrath of the Imperium set with 2 more pieces of Shit Splitter and Nyx Hound, while also tacking on a Balorgh helmet. Outside of that, you don't really need to change anything as far as I'm concerned, other than possibly making a few gear pieces well fitted rather than divines if you're a dodge roll enthusiast. Going any further than that with traits seems to be a bit wasteful in my opinion, since we're very much a glass cannon here, and trying to tank ourselves up only tends to take away from potential that can be used elsewhere, while we just accept ourselves for the frail little archer that we are, hiding in the shadows and running to safety when we get caught. If you do decide to run normal campaigns, I personally have my slottables set up with Master at Arms, Deadly Aim, Wrathful Strikes, and Untamed Aggression in the blue section, along with Boundless Vitality, Celerity, Slippery, and Expert Evasion in the red section. And before I forget, you can use Artaeum Takeaway Broth as your consumable food, and then you can just use Crown Tri-Restoration Potions as your potions. When it comes to passive abilities, you'll want to unlock Master Assassin and Executioner from the Assassination skill line. Everything from Shadow aside from Dark Veil, since we won't really be needing that here. We're also going to want Catalyst from Siphoning. You'll want to max out your passives from the Bow skill line, the Medium Armor skill line. From the Vampire skill line, you'll want Dark Stalker and Strike from the Shadows. You'll want everything from the Fighters Guild with special attention paid to Slayer, and then anything from Undaunted, Alliance War, and Craft that you like to use, keeping Reach from the Assault section in mind. And then of course your racial passives. So on our skill bar, we're going to be spamming Focused Aim as our main snipe. Normally we use the other morph for a poison-based snipe, but in this case we do well with slightly more range and the addition of Minor Breach versus Minor Defile. If you prefer Defile, you can absolutely use the other morph, but I have better results with reducing the enemy's resistance with future shots rather than debuffing their heals. Next up we have Silver Shards, which is mainly being slotted to give us a damage buff from the Slayer passive in the Fighters Guild skill line. In sticky situations, this can also be spammed when 2 or more enemies are surrounding you, perhaps on a flag, and can come in clutch when used in this way to finish off multiple low health enemies. Next up is Shadowy Disguise, which is our invisibility skill. Coming out of invisibility grants us a guaranteed critical within 3 seconds, and paired with the Vampire passive Strike from the Shadows, we'll be sure to leave a good first impression on anyone unlucky enough to be in our sights. This skill is obviously also used for sneaking around and escaping from situations that we can't survive due to being rather low in health and defense. Next up we have Concealed Weapon, which is also mainly being used as a passive steroid, granting us Minor Expedition just for being slotted, as well as giving us a 10% damage boost for 5 seconds if we leave Sneak, Invisibility, or if Major Expedition ends while in combat. Our last skill, Camouflaged Hunter, is also being placed here as sort of a steroid for Slayer, but can also be useful when trying to find another sneaky ganker in a fort or around a flag. And then Toxic Barrage will be our ultimate because it's just so powerful and there really isn't anything else to take its place. Regarding alternatives, I know that some people like to run Magnum Shot, otherwise known as Magnum Dong.
Whoa, whoops, oh! I dropped my monster condom that I used for my Magnum Dong
on a setup like this, and I would say that if you want to use it, then you definitely should use it, and just get rid of one of the steroids, and then the same goes for something like Channeled Acceleration, if you like to use that for mobility. I do find that the passive speed buff from Concealed Weapon works fine for me in that regard, but if your personal playstyle would have you swap any of the skills around that I have here on screen, then you definitely should do it, and try to make it as fun as possible for yourself. I like to make builds as accessible and as passive as possible, so using multiple steroid skills on the bar with really just 2 main skills being used is a very simple setup, so please do make changes as you see fit. There is no one correct way to play ESO, regardless of what some of the sweatier players would have you believe, and the main thing that I like to preach is that you should try to have fun, because we're all playing a video game after all. For a rotation, we don't have any buffs to apply to ourselves here, so the main idea is to keep all of your passive damage steroids in mind when you're moving around in the world. We get a bonus to our damage from the Vampire passive when we leave Sneak or Invisibility, and we also get a 10% damage buff when leaving Sneak or Invisibility during a fight. So you'll really just want to be sure that when you engage a fight, you begin shooting Focused Aim directly after coming out of Shadow form. The Vampire damage buff should last long enough for you to pull off somewhere between 2 and 5 snipes, depending on the mobility and the speed of your hands, while the Concealed Weapon passive should be somewhere between 4 and 8 shots. So be sure to go back into Invisibility during fights to kind of reproc the damage buffs rather than going back to your vanilla stats while wasting stamina with weaker shots. And one final tip for playing as a vampire is to use the Vamps add-on. This will just pin all of the vampire feeding locations on your map within Cyrodiil, so you don't have to run around like a chicken with its head cut off trying to find one, or, you know, have to port back to the normal zones and risk having to wait in a queue or something like that. Alright, so I grabbed a couple clips to showcase what this build looks like in action. Nothing too crazy or sweaty, really, so you can just get an idea of whether or not this would be fun for you to try out, or maybe find that the Nightblade life is too rich for your blood. As always, thanks for sticking around and watching. I appreciate everyone's support around here, and if you don't mind liking the video and subbing to the channel if you enjoyed it, that would be appreciated too. Alright, see you next time.